The following is a link to the Science of Learning WordPress blog. This contains a number of videos discussing the effectiveness of different teaching strategies. In this case study, we aim to introduce an alternative teaching strategy to a higher education class in order to theoretically improve the learning of students. How is the current class being taught? We will be examining a class within the Psychology Department of a UK university. The second year module in question provided learning resources including PowerPoint slides, recommended reading, learning outcomes, in-class practice, multiple choice questions, a revision guide and the exam marking guidelines. The learning outcomes were designed to provide students with an idea of what to expect from exam questions. Outcomes were worded in the style of an essay question and students were told that essay questions are always based on learning outcomes. Students were also told to create an essay plan for each learning outcome. During class, students were given personal response system devices or clickers in order to be able to answer the in-class multiple choice questions. These questions were again designed to familiarise students with what kind of questions to expect in the exam. The final lecture's PowerPoint was based solely on what to expect in the exam, again referring to the learning outcomes and multiple choice questions. How essays were to be marked was also outlined. This kind of module structure could be said to be an example of teaching to the test. Research has demonstrated that whilst this teaching strategy often produces high exam performance, it is ineffective in terms of long-term learning. As a result, this teaching strategy should be replaced for an alternative, more effective method. What alternative teaching strategies do we suggest? We suggest introducing stories and example cases in order to change this learning environment. Research indicates that information presented in the form of a narrative or anecdote is more easily understood and recalled than abstract principles. A basic example of this is the application of mnemonic strategies to learning. For instance, the mnemonic Richard of York gave battle in vain is often used to teach the colours of the spectrum. Storytelling is often mentioned in pedagogy literature as an effective teaching aid in adult education. It can often be seen in the form of case studies and role-play. Gracer, 2002, discusses how the mind constructs and represents stories by breaking down storytelling into different levels. The explicit wording of a story is referred to as the surface code, whilst the text base is the structure of the story. The situation model refers to the setting and sequence of events within the plot, and the thematic point is the main message of the story. Gracer reports that whilst the surface code is often not retained in memory for longer than a minute, and the text base no longer than an hour, the situation model of a story and the thematic point can be stored in long-term memory for years. This means that although the actual wording or composition of a story decays from the listener's memory, the deeper levels of understanding remain. This demonstrates the effectiveness of using storytelling as a learning tool or as part of a teaching strategy. How will the new teaching strategy affect learning in the classroom? In order to increase learning as opposed to performance that occurs in the outlined class, storytelling could be applied to the lectures. Using storytelling as a teaching strategy could potentially increase the students' levels of learning, as storytelling is known to be an effective learning tool. Niehauser, 1993. Using stories would improve levels of learning so long as the stories are believable and entertaining. If interesting and relevant stories are applied to the lecture content, students should come to associate the lecture information with the understanding of the story. This would make the information presented more memorable to the listener and thus cement both their understanding and memory of the topic in question. Another reason storytelling would be successful in the learning environment is that by applying the original lecture content to human experiences, lecturers can cause the students to take a more active role in learning as they become involved with the story and relate to the characters. As an audience, the students would be required to engage with the story and find meaning within it. Using storytelling to appeal to students' imaginations could help transform learning from a means to an end, the end being performing well in exams, into the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. Finally, storytelling can be used to educate by leading students from the familiar to the unfamiliar. Roster, 2002. By using a familiar experience, storytellers can build on the audience's prior knowledge and introduce new concepts. The introduction of new theories in this way would enable the lecturer to incorporate more difficult ideas into learning using the context of human experiences. Also, stories that transform knowledge in this way can act as a source of motivation and encouragement for individuals who find the learning process difficult. Based on the supporting evidence, we believe that storytelling would be an effective teaching strategy resulting in long-term learning and the acquisition of knowledge.